Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. All right, and with that, returning to The Brian Nichols Show, he's always ready to roar, the one and only Marc Clair. Welcome back to The Brian Nichols Show.
What's up, Brian? The rumors are true. I am always ready to roar.
I knew the rumors were true, man. I talked to you about the rumors beforehand. You even confirmed them. I had to make sure. I'm not going to go ahead and air dirty laundry without it being at least a little fact checked. But
this man cites his sources. He doesn't just
always,
go on rumors. Yeah.
Always. Come on, you gotta do journalism better than the folks over at CNN. Well, I'm not Brian Stelter. I'm the better Brian. So
you're definitely the better Brian.
With that being
don't
said,
let Brian McWilliams here. I said that.
Well, yeah, he's off in like the middle of Europe though. But regardless, hey, my friend, welcome back to the program. It's been a while. I know you've been busy in your world. You've been so busy in your world. Yeah, you could say that you've been doing. Let's see, we talked about this before. You did a world tour. You're going on every libertarian podcast out there. You're just on Dave Smith.
Apparently, I'm a hot commodity, man. I'm getting tossed around.
Jason Stapleton. Yeah. Who else were you recently on?
Well, I was on Pete. I almost called him Mance Raymond. I was on Pete's show because he invited me on just to talk about going to Mexico, which I recently did. And so, but that kind of did. I don't know what happened. It wasn't really my plan. That just turned into me going on rants upon rants. And apparently I had a lot of stuff building up inside. And then Dave had actually already invited me on before that. But then once I did that, it kind of guided the conversation a little bit too.
Well, it works out because we were already kind of planning to have you on at some point in the future. And it coalesced with you in this kind of new approach to the way you look at life, the way you look at liberty. And I wanted to bring this to the audience today because part of when we're into the sales world, this is part that I like to bring to the table saying, hey, there doesn't have to be a perfect one-size-fits-all solution. There's what works for you. There's what works for your unique situation. Not every company like Comcast can go out and, I'll give you a real life example. They can go out and they can do big dumb internet pipes all day long. Would I want them to do a massive VoIP solution for a contact center? Absolutely not, because that's not where their skills lie. So the same thing is true when you look at what works for you in your pursuit of individual liberty, but also liberty by and large. And you're doing it right now by taking a step away from politics and focusing on you, the individual, making yourself the most, as Jason Stapleton likes to focus, the wealth, power, and influence that you can build up. That autonomy. He's a sponsor in the network here for the Nomad Network. What can we do to build a community of like-minded folks who are out there focusing on being the best version of yourselves? And you're taking a hard 180 away from that political approach, which, let's be real, Lines of Liberty, Ron Paul, is a political animal. So, Marc, what was that abrupt 180 that really kind of put you in not only a completely different position in terms of politics, but geographically as well?
Yeah, I don't know how abrupt it is, but it probably might seem abrupt on the surface because a lot of this was kind of brewing sort of in the background, I guess. And I think in many ways I was subtly trying to change some of the tone of my show sort of after COVID started, of the flagship show on Lions of Liberty. I was just trying to focus a little bit more on like solutions for people's lives, like how people can sort of, improve their skill set, become mobile. These are all sort of things I was talking about. But I never did like a hard rebrand out front, like Jason Stapleton style. So I think when I came out on Pete's show and really went hard on this stuff, maybe a lot of people that hadn't been quite noticing because I wasn't outwardly pushing it. It might have seemed like more of a hard 180 to that, in the public sense. But for me, it really wasn't that hard. It was very gradual. Actually, it was something I'd been kind of thinking about for a long time, even before COVID. I was kind of thinking about how insecure I think we can all be, or how secure we can feel, I should say, in our full-time job or 9 to 5 or what have you, normie job if you want to say, and how we never really are that secure in it, even if it feels that way. And I definitely felt that way for a long time. But COVID was the first time that I saw that kind of in action, when I personally got put on furlough for about 3 months during the beginning of the pandemic. And that made me realize, I had this like well-paying job. Well-paying job is relative in Los Angeles because you can make good money in Los Angeles and you're just living in Los Angeles. Like that's all you're paying to do. But it still felt like pretty stable. Like I could do that as long as I wanted to. But that was like the first thing that really told me like, okay, even when you have a full-time job, nothing is really guaranteed. And at the end, when you think about it, we're all kind of really selling ourselves. Like we're all an entrepreneur selling ourselves in some way or another, selling something we create, some knowledge we have, or just our time, our labor, whatever it is. It's just that most of us are just selling, we're just being entrepreneurs with one product, our time to one client, whatever that employer is. So we're all kind of doing it. Just some of us are doing it in what I would say, especially in 2021, is an irresponsible way. I'm not saying it's irresponsible to just have a job and go to your work and earn your income and just think about that, but to not be thinking about outside the box, especially after the last 18, 19 months, especially with sweeping mandates coming down against, it seems like they're coming after almost anyone who's an employee. If you're not thinking about this stuff, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And for me, and when I say this stuff, like I'm talking as much to myself, past versions of myself, part of the future or current and future versions of myself. I'm doing it maybe as much to motivate myself as anybody else, because it all starts right here, with the man in the mirror. Like this is where everything starts. So if we're talking about liberty, if we're out there talking about liberty, I think it's important that we be the kind of people that people want to follow. So if we want to talk about how much liberty, how great liberty is, it's hard to do that if you don't have some in your own life. If you don't have some control over your own life, if you can't make your rent next week, it's really hard to get people to listen to what you're saying, about liberty and how great freedom is.
You need liberty in your own life. I wrote that down because how often, Mark, I asked this question so rhetorically, how often do we see the libertarian on social media who has all the answers to everything?
and that used to be me, so I get it, but I mean, like, not that I don't have all the answers, I do.
It hurts though now, right? Now it hurts when we sit there and we see that person, because we're like, number one, you're wasting your time, but number two, who are you? Like, what are you doing? Why do you think, and this right here hurts, I think, a lot of libertarians to hear.
Yeah.
Why do you think people will listen to you? Like, they look at your life and they're like, I'm not going to take advice from someone who I'm at a quick glance thinking isn't in a better position in life than me. That's just human nature, folks. And instead of acknowledging that, we get insulted, we get mad, and then we make our Libertarian Party's little, social clubs, which just makes me want to vomit. But like the fact that that's how we've approached this. Let me ask you this. Do you see at least maybe a turn in the right direction with the tenor of the politics? And I ask that by premising it with the context that I just saw a poll. 71% of Americans think woke culture has gone too far and it's hurting society. Only 20 or 29% think that it's actually helpful. You're seeing Joe Biden, let's go Brandon, permeate throughout the society as people realize more and more that, inflation is running rampant. COVID restrictions are increasing en masse and people are looking for ways out. Is there hope? And I just talked about this with Eric Brakey, that proverbial white pill. Are we taking steps in the right direction?
This is something I've had to think about a lot, because after a lot of those podcast appearances I've made recently, several people have said to me that, I seem really pessimistic or I seem really black-pilled. And I appreciate hearing that, because I don't want to come across as like the bummer, the guy that's just delivering the bad news. And it's kind of like a tough line to walk, because I want to be Mr. Positive. I want to be, and I think I am. I think just by taking control of my own life, I'm leading in a sort of by example. But I don't want to discourage. I guess it's how do I put this? It's kind of like I feel like I stopped lying to myself at some point in the last year and a half. Because before this, it really seemed to me even still in my mind, while I was serious about the political issues, serious about the Ron Paul campaigns, shit, I maxed out my money to those campaigns before I even had money to spend. I probably shouldn't have been, actually. But I think that in many ways, politics was still a hobby to me. It was just a fun thing to talk about, so I can go to Libertarian Party conventions and hang out with like-minded people, and we can go party afterwards and hang out on Bourbon Street. We can make jokes about Mises and Rothbard, and we all get it, and it's not weird, and it's it's just fun people you can get along with. And that's kind of like how I took it. And candidates run in the LP, and we know they're not going to win. And they know that they come on my show, and I invite them on. They tell me they're not going to win, and we all agree they're not going to win. And it's all fun. It's all well and good. But now, after the last year and a half, like, this isn't the game anymore. Like, this is actually affecting everybody's life now. Like, no one can really say they're not affected by this stuff at this point, except for maybe people that got a little more ahead of the game. And I mean, guess who's not that affected by this? And not saying not, because everybody's been affected to it, obviously. Like I was gonna say Dave. Dave is from New York, so he's obviously been affected tremendously in that way. But in terms of his personal life, in terms of being able to take care of his family, he can do that because he's kind of made himself independently able to produce income, like through his comedy, through his podcasts, and the shutdowns didn't really affect him in that way. I'm sure they affected his personal life in many ways too, just being from New York and everything, of course. Or Spike Cohen, for example, like someone like that who built a successful business, and now he's good. Like, he can kind of do his own thing, and he doesn't have to worry about whatever mandates or whatever come down. He can choose to do what he wants. So I think people like that are like good examples to follow. I just don't know if that political path is one that produces, much. And I think even they admit, like, they're not following that political path in order to gain office. They're doing it to influence people and sway people in a certain direction. And I think there's value in that. But I also think, have you seen where we are? Like we need to either take action in our own lives immediately, or should have already, or try to catch up, or put ourselves in better situations by moving geographically, or taking some kind of political action in a defensive way that will actually be immediately effective. And I guess, like, the long game project of the Mises Caucus that I was a big supporter of when it first started, a big fan of. I even hosted a big summit with, like, a lot of the podcasters, like Pete, like Tom, like Dave, Jason Stapleton, about, like, our influence trying to get people into the LP. And it's made me think, like, was that the right path? Like, to get nerdy, with great power comes great responsibility. And there is power behind the microphone, especially when you have an audience. And so I've had to think to myself, like, am I conveying the right message? And I think for many years I saw myself more as just like a mediator, a moderator, somebody that just interviews people and kind of lets them have their speak, and that is what I do. But I do also feel the onus to kind of speak out a little bit more about what I'm actually thinking and what's going on in my life, and maybe because my personal life has been affected so much by all this stuff in what turns out to be a good way. So I'm fine with it in a sense, because these world events that have happened have led to so many wonderful things in my life, and led to me doing things and pushing myself in ways that I might not have if I was able to stay comfortable, as I had been for many years prior. So I think being hungry and letting myself get hungry, there's a big benefit to that too.
Marc, is it more so that you don't trust the LP, or you don't trust the political, the political infrastructure as a means not to maybe give people liberty, right? Because I don't think that's the argument, but more so to serve as a safeguard to help protect individual liberty, right? If we're going to go to the minarchist argument for the state, right? To maintain that just minute level of force to make sure that you're able to protect the individual's rights. Let's just pretend that we can get to that utopia world, right? Is that the issue, though, that it's the LP trying to go this route versus something like a GOP, a Rand Paul, Massey approach?
Yeah, I think it's the vehicle more than the intent, because unfortunately, and this is something I didn't want to admit to myself for a long time, because we want to fight the power and fight the duopoly. But we are in a two-party system right now. And if you do want to affect change, you kind of have to do it within that two-party system. That sucks to admit, but it's true. And we can fight the duopoly all we want, but that's a separate fight. That's a separate fight from like actually trying to change things right now. And there's a lot of energy in this country. There's a lot of anti-establishment energy in this country, and it's not residing in the LP. And when you're over on a third party, you're in some ways, you're kind of like telling those people you're not there. They're out. We admit it on podcasts for years. I'll play the tapes if you want me to. We know it's not effective, but we just use it because it makes us feel better about who we're around. That's ultimately what everybody says. They say, I feel more at home in the LP. I like the people more in the LP. It feels like the place for me. Okay, that's great. That's great for a social club. Like you said, it's not great for political change necessarily. If you want to create political change, you might have to go places you don't want to go. That's just the reality of it. And that reality sucks, but it's still the reality. So I'm just reporting the facts.
Mark, is it partly also that we've we as libertarians right there, and that's the issue. We say we as libertarians, small L.
Hey, you're on the We Are Libertarians network. So.
That's true. But we are, as the libertarians with the small L, want to then identify with the big L Libertarian Party. And here's the thing, right? Conservatives don't go out and say, I'm going to go be the conservative party. They go to be the Republican Party because that's the vessel to get political action. We're looking at our political party not as a means to get political action, but as a means to really feel good about ourselves for being right on the issues, which is a role, I think. Yeah. And maybe that's the argument, right? Is the LP at the point where we need to take a step back and say, are we in a position to win elections? And hey, I'm not gonna at all, cast aspersions to the elections that we have won, especially those local elections. More of that. And I think that has to be the approach, specifically, is focusing on those local elections, but then looking at where to, just take a step back, maybe. I mean, and I'm not trying to beat on him here because Greg Neely's a good friend of the show, but looking at the vote totals in New Jersey, he didn't even come in third. He came in fourth. Let's see, Madeline Hoffman, who I've never heard of, she was the third place candidate, the Green Party candidate. So there are certain states where if you want to have a say, like in New Jersey, where a truck driver who spent $150 in his campaign just unsat the sitting Senate majority leader.
That could have been a libertarian.
Exactly. And we're seeing that in New Hampshire, right? Where the sitting, I think he's the House majority speaker of the assembly. He's a Rothbardian. He believes in Austrian economics. Like that could be you. That could be us. Thomas Massey and Rand Paul are easily the best congressmen and best senators in Congress, hands down, like without a doubt. And yet they don't have the big L next to their name. I think that's okay. And I guess that's my next question is it okay to do both approaches, Mark? Can we go out and live our best lives, but as we live that best life and accumulate that wealth, power, and influence to live that truly autonomous lifestyle, can we also still play that political game to try and make sure that we are holding back those individuals who would try to use government force to inflict as much devastation as they could, were it not for people who have been standing up and fighting back?
Sure. I mean, it's more than okay. To me, everything's okay. First of all, like, I'm not going to tell people what to do. I can just tell people what I think at the end of the day. So everything's okay, But I will say that I think it's about priorities, and I think what I should prioritize. So I'm not saying you should, but what I prioritize now, and I think it's part of this now is that like I got married in the last year and a half.
Yes, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And so that does kind of change the way I mean, it's just it's a nature and natural instinct. Like now I have a sort of a protective element of me. Like I have people that I'm responsible for and that I'm not going to let anything happen to. And that influences everything I do. And some might say that I didn't take the smart route on paper, actually, by maybe, leaving the situation I was in for various reasons, for a reason. And but I would actually say the opposite, because I'm actually taking control now, finally, for once, and not letting some things hold me back from that. And I'm taking control of my own life, my own income. And it's not going to be a smooth road, but guess what? Life isn't always a smooth road. And sometimes maybe you got to spend a few weeks eating ramen. I'm not there, but I'm just saying, maybe sometimes you got to do that. Hopefully it's mostly when you're in college, but sometimes you might have to make sacrifices in the short term to actually improve your situation in the long term. And I think that now, especially now that short term and long term they're getting smushed together, because everything feels like a short term priority right now. Like, I mean, it pains me every day when I see people saying like, I'm losing my job because of the vaccine mandate, or I have to take this shot because I can't pay my rent next week if I don't. And that hurts me to see. Like, I say this stuff out of love, out of love for my people, man. Like my Ron Paul people or Liberty people or what have you. If I see a friend driving off the road and I yell at him to stop driving off the road, it's not because I'm mad at him. It's because I don't want him to drive off the road, and I don't want to go with him either. So that's kind of my approach here. Like, I just want people to think to realize we're not in a game anymore. Like if you were looking at politics as a fun thing we do, a place we make friends, yeah, we go out and have campaigns and have fun, and it doesn't matter if we win. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do that. But if you're doing that and you don't know how you're going to pay your rent next week, if you lose your job because of a vax mandate or because of anything, then I would say that you might want to think about prioritizing some other things first. That's what I would say. And if you're in a situation where there's immediate political action you can get involved in that will, in a defensive way, that will better your situation on the local level, then do that too. And if that happens to work doing it in the LP, then do that. I'm not saying not. I don't actually really care what the vehicle is. I just think people should realize that we're not in a game and shit's getting real and shit's going to get more and more real because these mandates are not disappearing. And I want to be wrong. Like, so maybe people have a point when they say I'm black-pilled or pessimistic. So I encourage everyone to fight them and resist them and to not comply with them because they're immoral and you shouldn't freaking bargain with evil. So I want everyone to resist that. I want everyone to resist at all. Even people that took the vaccine early. I think you should still resist mandates. But that's not what's happening. That's not what I see happening, especially with a lot of libertarians. So I'm here to say, I think you got to think about things differently if you're in a position where you're complying with things you don't want to comply with, or complying with things because you think it's going to make life easier. Because guess what, buckos? It's not. It's only going to get harder from here.
I also think, Mark, and I'm not telling you your lived experience is wrong. I promise you I'm not. I'm not one of those mansplainers, but rather I think I'm experiencing this myself, is that, I hit my microphone, is that it's been tough in the Northeast. You hailed from California. And the Northeast, specifically, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, that specific area, got hit hard, and the lockdowns were intense. California, lockdowns intense. So we've seen the worst, and I say worst so loosely because coming up, at some point here, you guys are going to hear from our friend Stuart from Liberty Down Under. Because Australia, things are insane. I mean, people aren't even they're afraid to go on a podcast because they're afraid the government's going to come and arrest them. That's dystopian. That's just, it's insane that we are at this point where that's the conversation in Australia. But in the Northeast and in California, we've experienced the worst of the American COVID response. And it's been very difficult for me to understand how there are some libertarians out there who have been so meh about things. And I think partly, Mark, it's because they really haven't experienced what we've experienced. They haven't seen what happens when, 2/3 of your community looks at you like you're the weird person because you're not wearing a mask when you're walking outside.
Alone or with your dog.
Right. Like that becomes like, what? This isn't real life.
I do think that's part of it. I do think like being in places that we see the worst of this stuff is definitely, I don't think black pilled. I think it's just realistic pilled. It's like, here's what's happening pilled. Like, I'm not imagining things. Like, this occurred. I lived through it. So, but yeah, I think maybe people that live in areas that weren't as affected by it, or people that have jobs that were easily kept remotely, or I don't know, people that just never went out that much in the first place. They didn't notice all the restaurants that are shut down around them. I don't know, but I saw it big time. Like, not besides my personal life, just looking at Los Angeles, almost everyone I knew was out of work for 3 months. Everyone, like I know so many people that work in the TV industry and that didn't have full-time jobs. So, when that stuff was shut down, they just don't have money for 3 months. They don't have any income for 3 months. And I saw this among not just the libertarian community, like all my friends, everybody I know. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's so, and maybe they think like, oh, I live in this place where it doesn't really affect me or something. But I just, this is a virus, and I'm not talking about COVID. This is a mind virus, and it's not contained by borders. So I think there are places you can move to for short-term kicking the can down the road benefits. But at the end of the day, I think this is coming in many ways, almost everywhere, if not everywhere.
It's institutionalized hypochondria. It's wild, Mark. But with that being said, I can't believe it. We're already close pressed the time here. So what we want to do is make sure we give you the final bit of time to promote anything you're working on, but also want to make sure we direct people towards the amazing flagship show that you had over at the amazing team of Lions of Liberty. So that being said, Marc Clair, the floor is yours.
Yep. Find me every Monday on the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast. You can also listen to my compatriots, Brian McWilliams, on Wednesdays with Electric Liberty Land, John Odermatt on Thursdays with Finding Freedom. That's the Lions of Liberty crew right there. You can also find me on the Second Print Comics podcast, with We Are Libertarian Zone, Remzo Martinez, every single Wednesday, where we get nerdy, talk comics. It's not political, but we're both libertarians, so you know that stuff's coming out one way or the other. Secondprintcomics.com, or find us on podcatchers for that. I also do a little writing on Substack occasionally now. You can find that. My Substack is called Metanoia, and you can find it at marcclair.substack.com. Also, I tweet a lot. I'm addicted to Twitter. I admit it. You can follow me on Twitter at Marc D. Clair. Mark with a C, not a K. Last name C-L-A-I-R, no E, at Marc D. Clair. I think that's it.
Marc Clair, Lions of Liberty, folks, if you want to go ahead and learn more. How about this for you audio listener? If you're driving, you're like, I can't remember all that, and I do not have a pen or pencil at my disposal. No worries. Just go ahead when you're done. Click the artwork in your podcast catcher. It'll bring you right to BrianNicholsShow.com, where you can find today's episode, all of Mark's social media, all of the work that he's doing over at Lions, as well as the work he's doing with our good friend, yes, Remzo Martinez at Second Prince Comics, and of course, the entire transcript of today's episode. Oh, and by the way, all 400 plus episodes of the Brian Nichols Show. But with that being said, Marc Clair from Lions of Liberty, thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Brian Nichols Show.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at BrianNicholsShow.com.